have you ever met someone new, maybe potential love material, or even a new friend or a boss, asked for their birth information and immediately checked out your chart with theirs, attempting to get some insights into whether or not this is a connection that will last, fizzle, or be challenging? I know I have. Relationships are one of the main draws that pull people towards astrology, but it can get confusing fast. There are so many different techniques to analyze the charts and lots of different data points to try and synthesize. So today we'll be doing a deep dive into the world of relationship astrology. And I have with me a true master in the field who's been practicing, teaching, and writing books about astrology for decades. What you may or may not know is that he was also the astrologer working behind the scenes on the show, The Millionaire Matchmaker. So he had to make potential matches between the millionaires quickly based on their astrological charts. So he's also taught with us several relationship courses, including Love Among the Elements and also Step Away from the Seventh House. And he's someone you all know and love, and one of the most popular astrologers on our platform. He is the one and only legendary Christopher Renstrom. So Christopher, thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast again.
God, thank you for inviting me. I love it when we get to do a podcast together. It's so much fun.
Me too. I love watching you solo, and I love when we get to have conversations too. So thank you so much. Before we dive in, I want to thank you, our community, our listeners, our viewers, for tuning into our channel. It is your curiosity and enthusiasm for astrology that makes it possible for us to produce and run this show. Now it's been running for over 7 years. Can you believe this?
Stop it. Really?
Oh my God. Featuring some of the world's most gifted astrologers. We're so honored to be able to give them a platform and highlight their work. And you are what enables us to do that. So thank you for that. Okay, Christopher, to start, can you briefly explain the landscape of relationship techniques when looking at astrology charts?
Well, the first one, which is the most simplest one, is what's your sun sign? Okay, that's the technique that everyone knows. Oh, you're a Scorpio? I think I'll pass. Something like that, right? Okay,
yes.
That's the simplest, most basic technique that everyone knows, which is what is your sun sign? Okay, after that, you add the moon. What's your moon sign? And everyone knows, okay, maybe the sun's not compatible, but maybe on another level, our moons are compatible or something like that. After that, you go into what can sometimes be much more extensive work in relationship astrology. Relationship astrology is also really based, and we're using that as kind of like a general term. Relationship astrology is really based on how you as a practicing astrologer view relationships, okay? Everyone views relationships differently. Some people, where's my soulmate? How do I find my soulmate? Or I feel like this is a past life connection, and this person, has shown up, and I feel like we have business that we have to settle with one another. It may not necessarily be a constructive relationship or a fulfilled one. It may be more sort of we've got issues from the past that we need to settle. You may be looking at patterns in charts. You may experience in your own life, there's always the same type of person who keeps showing up again and again and again, like a bad penny. How do I get rid of them? Or it would be like, I'm always falling for the same person and getting hurt again and again and again. And how can I redirect or rectify this? And so what our expectations are of a relationship is going to be different. There could be also kind of is this person good for me or bad for me? Because you know what? I don't want to waste the time. I've spent so much time dating, putting work into relationships or whatever. If this person's bad news or whatever, I want to just swipe left, okay, on this. I just want to are we compatible or not? We're not. Okay, next, sort of thing. They want, that answer right off the bat. So it really, when you look at relationship astrology, it's really going to be based at the way that you look at relationships itself. Are you a composite? Are you two people coming together to form one relationship and that's it? Are you two people involved in a three-legged race, where one leg is tied to the other person, you have to make your way down, the race course. Are you, are you working in sync with one another? Are you all about your differences? Are you an arranged marriage? There are all these different sorts of things. And so astrology, the beauty of astrology is that there are no hard, fast rules. What we have is a library of techniques. We have a bazillion techniques, but cooking has a bazillion techniques. No two people really cook the same way. You can become fluent in different recipes and things like that, but then you're going to add your own flair. You're going to add your own statement. Some people may follow the recipe religiously, and some people might be like, oh, that's a great idea, but I'm going to do this with it. So all of these things come into working with relationship astrology. And I think in the end, what we're really looking for is a match. We're looking for a fit, and we want that fit to work. We want that fit to be fulfilling. We want that fit to be a place where we share love in our lives. I mean, love is always being brought into our lives in countless different places. And I don't think we really assign that to like a partner. Love comes in so many different ways, so many different avenues. But, you want to share love. And some people want one partner. Some people want several partners. Some people want to be left alone. So these are the things that relationship astrology will address.
So there's a couple techniques that people talk about and often debate about, which one's more accurate, which one do you use? Synastry is one, and then composite charts. Can you explain the differences between those two techniques and why you might want to use one versus the other?
Sure. Synastry is the older, and it comes from, I think it's Synastry and it's not sinister, but it's Sin or sign, Astra or Astra for star. It means co-star, basically, would be the modern definition of synastry. And what that's involved with is putting the two charts together and seeing what kind of conversation starts. How do they align with one another? Are they full of trines and sextiles, which of course is everyone's hope because that's harmonious, are they full of oppositions or squares, or do they totally not get each other whatsoever at all, And so the synastry is really about looking at the two people and how they're going to interact with one another. The composite chart, which really kind of became named and then popular in the 1970s. And what we have to remember the 1970s, what do we have going on here in America? It's the sex revolution. The sexual revolution is going on in the 1970s. So everyone's about relationships, and we have Pluto and Libra during this period of time. So the idea of the composite chart was to, instead of working with the two different charts, let's kind of incorporate the two people into a relationship. Let's incorporate them and make them an entity. And I believe that Robert Hand argued for you have person one, person two, and then you've got the relationship itself. And so they come together. And this is a chart that basically incorporates or composes the two people as one entity. And that became very popular for a number of different reasons. It could be oh, wow, low score on the composite chart, forget it, or high score on the composite chart, we're meant to be, and you didn't have to do the sort of configuring or the working out of the different dynamics of the two charts. You could kind of come up with a summation, and everyone loves a quick summation. It's based on finding the midpoints. So one person, you find the midpoint between one person's sun and another person's sun. You can find the midpoints between one person's nodes and the other person's nodes. You find the midpoints between the midheavens. You find the midpoints between the ascendant. And voila, you have a composite chart. Midpoint, or it's also known as half sum, is this idea that it's the midpoint between two primary points, like planets in the zodiac. So, for instance, and I get this example from a wonderful reference book, which is Larousse Encyclopedia of Astrology, by the way. But in it, the author says, for example, if Venus is at 10 Gemini and Mars is at 20 Leo, the midpoint between those two points, the Venus and the Mars, and you can already see the relationship idea that's being set up, Venus and a Mars, the midpoint is 15 Cancer, and so this would be where the two planets, this is the midpoint between the two planets. So it becomes a sensitive point. And for some astrologers, it becomes a binding point. It becomes almost like a subtext. You may be Venus in Gemini, and I may be Mars in Leo, but we come together in Cancer, which is the zodiac sign of hearth and home. So we're meant to like start a hearth and home together. I mean, that could be a summation or an idea that comes from that. Midpoints themselves are we have evidence of them from the 13th century. A lot of people think it's the 20th century, but actually we have 13th century evidence with Guido Bonatti, who used them. And it is the German astrologer Alfred Witt, who was the founder of the Uranian system or Hamburg school, who sort of revives the midpoint and then gives his own shift on it. And then that's taken up by Reinhold Eberton. And that would be Germany in the 1920s, teens to the 20s would be there. Anyway, that's your whole learning channel, background that you got there. So even though composite charts make their appearance in the 1970s, the precedent of using midpoints to find sensitive areas or areas of agreement or manifestation between 2 points of a chart, that's an older tradition. So it didn't take much to kind of take, midpoint between the planets and midpoint between charts and put that together and come up with the composite chart. And so composite, as we know, comes from the Latin putting together, and our modern understanding of it is really kind of like two people melding into one entity, But I also kind of like the French medieval interpretation of it, which was compost, which like you throw these things into a heap, and they kind of like come together or, deteriorate together, something like that. But it's the idea of things coming together. It's not necessarily being the sum of all the parts. And that's something I do want to underline. Again, in our wanting answers, we want to say, okay, this is the sum of all of its parts. And that's an easy way to look at a relationship. But anyone who's been in a relationship can tell you, no, there's no sum of all parts. All parts are movable parts, usually at the same time. And so you have to work with all of those movable parts. Two people don't become one person. They're still who they are. And that trade-off, that conversation, that negotiation, it could be power dynamics, cooperation, competitiveness, that's ingrained in almost all, if not every relationship.
Christopher, I know you have your own technique that you created when you were on The Millionaire Matchmaker, kind of out of necessity, because you needed to make quick and easy matches between the millionaires.
Right.
But would you say that you lean toward, and we'll go into that in just a sec, but would you lean more towards a Synastry technique or the composite? Have you played around with them? Have you found more accuracy with either one of them?
Right. My preference has always been towards Synastry because I like to see the dynamics that are at work between the two people. I don't believe that two people become one. Okay. I think that two people are engaged in a relationship, and a relationship, can it be an encompassing or including energy? Absolutely. But it doesn't rob you or your partner or partners of your identities. You're still who you are. Someone can be at the steering wheel and someone can be in the passenger seat, but that doesn't keep the person from the passenger seat going, wrong turn, you want to go over there, you want to go, there's this constant interaction that's going between the two. The other thing that I like about Synastry is that there aren't any hard, fast rules. It's very fluid and it's very flexible. Years ago, I used to do something called Astrology Slam here in the city where I live. And it was kind of like people would get together on the first Tuesday of every month. We'd have everyone come together first Tuesday of every month. And you could send me your birth information. I would cast all the horoscopes and you're allowed to ask one question. And, people showed up and, why wouldn't you? And so, questions would come out and all these sorts of things and they bring friends. But what we all started to notice as the months went by is that you can have the sort of same question or same theme of questions and things like that showing up. But when we answered the question, there was a common thread of planetary signatures that were running through it. Like it would be a night in which Venus-Saturn was going to be very strong, or it would be a night in which like Moon-Pluto was going to be very strong. And these were people who did not, some people knew each other. There were the regulars, but there were a number of people who did not know each other. And we would be laughing at like, oh my God, this is another Moon Pluto thing that's coming up. And no, it was kind of like, did you get the cosmic email that tonight's going to be, the theme is going to be Venus Saturn or something? But what struck me is that it is the nature of horoscopes to constellate. Okay. It's the nature of horoscopes to constellate, to link with other horoscopes, and like individual stars create a constellation to create a series of relationships or a community. It could be a longstanding community or, I see each other once a year community or whatever. But it's the nature of charts to constellate, and they're going to constellate in their own particular way. And to me, that I almost, what was it with the monkeys? They would hook or something. There were like a barrel of monkeys and they would hook by their tails or hands or something like that. That's what it would remind me of. And that to me was really kind of like the resonant idea of relationships, that charts are seeking their connection with other charts. And we're the ones who are kind of catching up.
I have to ask. Why do you think that is? What's the attracting mechanism that makes us constellate together in certain configurations?
One of the great mysteries of astrology. I love the fact that I can't answer that. Okay. I don't think there is an answer for it. One could say, well, Christopher, it's obvious, it's transits. Or, Christopher, maybe everyone's coming in with, heavy Venus-Saturn signatures or something like that. And those could all possibly be elements or ingredients. But what I love as an astrologer reading relationships is the reveal. Okay. It's not knowing how we're all going to constellate or hook. And then we see the reveal. And it's a wonderful thing because people are always talking their charts. The best way to learn astrology is to do an astrology reading and let someone do the talking, not all the talking, you have to do it reading, but, to listen to what they're saying and then to follow along on the chart, because most people are talking their charts and you can learn so much astrology from listening to that. But I also liked applying that same idea of listening to relationship work that you do with people, that you listen to the way that they're talking and then you track it there on the chart. And people can connect in ways that boggle the mind. If you read old astrology books, they'll say like, this relationship is the worst kind of relationship. And nowadays I see it as being one of the most popular combinations between people, so the culture changes. Our understanding of the planets might change, but the planets in astrology are pretty consistent. And you can see things emerge in relationships that defy your expectations and really open the door to new avenues and new corridors of exploration and, most importantly, bonding.
What do you think about the idea that opposites attract? Do you think that's true or not? Do you see that in the charts or not?
I cannot tell you how many times I've seen opposites attract. The question is, do they stay together? Opposites attract all the time, but do they stay together? And a lot of times I've seen them attract in periods of turmoil and crisis in one of the person's lives. Okay. that one of the people involved is going through a really difficult time, a really rough passage or something like that. And then there's, this opposites attract, type of thing that takes place. And so they're brought together, maybe in an erotic union, maybe they're brought together in a rescue me union, maybe they're brought together in, I think I'm finding out something about myself, but I have no idea what it is, and the other person's like there for them. It can be, or, I need to leave my lifestyle. I need to leave my culture. I need to leave my household. Opposite attractions can have this catharsis, and those relationships are so valuable because the whole point is to get you through the catharsis or to, reveal that your relationship is empty or that you were living by a set of expectations that isn't who you are, and so that can be wonderful, but at the same time, I've seen them oftentimes. I mean, that doesn't happen with all the oppositions, but I've seen a lot of them burn out because there's no sustainability, and then my argument of that is, if you're looking at opposite signs, it's because the seasons are so different. It's that someone born in spring may have a hard time relating to someone who's born in the autumn, and it's almost like having parents where one works the day shift and one works the night shift. They're passing one another, but they're not really connecting. But then that gets into other issues. But when people say like, oh, my partner's sign is the opposite sign, I haven't seen that hold up a lot. I haven't. I mean, it does. But, to be like, oh, I'm a Taurus, I'm going to get along with the Scorpio. It's like, did you, let the Scorpio in on that, type of thing, because they have such different views of life and the world.
One of the questions that an audience member asked when you did the live version of, I think it was Step Away from the Seventh House, was around progress charts and how we change through life. And does our relationship profile and what we're looking for, are there ways to see it in the chart?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And not just with progressions. I mean, a progression, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's moving the sun forward. The general rule is usually 1 degree per year, and you might have been born under Gemini, but your sun will progress to Cancer, and it can progress to Leo. And this would sort of affect your temperament. Although your go-to place will always be the natal horoscope. It will always be the birth horoscope. Progressions can chart the change of taste and temperament in a chart. For instance, I hated pasta as a kid, and like fell in love with pasta in my 20s and 30s, type of thing. It's like, your tastes change. That Captain Crunch when you were 7 doesn't really, sit as well when maybe you're 40, type of thing. And so a progressed chart will address that, But there are planets that come into play older. The most famous one is Saturn. Saturn in a chart, it may be prohibitive and very difficult when you're younger, especially in relationships. But then, because Saturn is so much about maturation and being older, when you get to a certain age, 30, I've seen it a lot in the 40s, you grow into your Saturn. And so the things that had seemed prohibitive or working against you are now things that are very experiential. You do more than wear them. They're in who you are. You've grown into your Saturn. And so the Saturn changes the nature of the relationships or what you're looking for. Uranus is a big one that can flip a chart. And I've seen that often happen in what's called the Uranus-Uranus opposition or the mid-age crisis. And I've seen that where, people are in solid relationships and they walk out on it and to find something new, or they've never been in a relationship and then they're suddenly in one. And I've even seen sexual attraction flip and change with Uranus, transiting Uranus oppositions. Pluto is an enormous one because it takes so long. And so you can sort of like live in a Plutonian place for a long period of time. Think of a cocoon, a caterpillar being in the cocoon, and then you sort of emerge into this butterfly. It sounds very romantic, this rebirth, but rebirth, like birth, can be messy and painful. And, what you come out of at the end of a Pluto transit bears very little resemblance to who you were going into that Pluto transit. So Pluto can also be a huge game changer in terms of what we look for with relationships. And what that does, Amanda, is that it mirrors the way that we look at relationships. I mean, we all exchange Valentine's cards in kindergarten and first grade. And, that's not the same thing that it was in high school, and it wasn't the same thing in college, and it wasn't the same thing, when you're in your 40s, so our understanding of love and relationship changes. And clearly astrology reflects that as well.
Mm-hmm. And our values too, right? Like I know with my first husband, it was really important that he's a great father, somebody that would be a great father to my children, my unborn children. And then with my second partnership, that's less of the focal point, so it is interesting to see how we change. There was another very touching question that came in during that class. One of our community members had lost her husband unexpectedly at age 36. Mm-hmm. And there was, it was, I think 3 or 4 years later, and she was wondering if she will find love again, and wondering if there is a way to see with transits or other aspects of our chart, is there a way to see when love might come into our lives and time things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't remember her chart or whether we discussed it or not, but usually with that kind of loss, that's going to be reflected in some stressful planetary transits. And those planetary transits might be 2.5 years long. They might be 7 years long. They might be 14 years long. What's wonderful about the transits versus this is fixed fate, okay, is that the transits are, you've got your natal chart, which is basically a screenshot of the sky at the time that you're born. Okay. But the planets don't stay there. I mean, they stay there because it's your portrait. Think of it as a picture of you at 1. You're like, okay, your picture at 1. Okay. It's not going to be your picture at 17, or whatever. Okay. It's going to change because the planets are in constant motion. There's still this idea that astrology is like a fixed fate, and this is the way that it's set up. And, it's going to play out like this, and that's it. You have to like grin and bear it, and astrology isn't. The whole point is it's about working with the time changes that are taking place in an astrological chart. My favorite example always goes back to this like church that I used to visit that had stained glass. I loved it. And at a certain time of day, the light would come through one end of the church and the stained glass would be illuminated, but at another time of day, the light was coming through another series of stained glass windows and they were illuminated. And this is what's going on in your astrological chart. The sun is moving around. The planets are lights too. They're moving around and they're going to illuminate stained glasses on this side of your chart and illuminate stained glasses on other sides of the chart at a different time. And the same thing can go with, absolutely, it goes with love. Not only do our love expectations change from decade to decade or years to years, but also what can be beautiful about the planetary transits is that we might have suffered a deep wound, and said, love's not for me. And the planets in their transits can almost be like the waves on the shore. If you live near the water and you can hear them, they can work with that energy, and it doesn't have to stay so tight. It doesn't have to stay so hurt. It can unwind and it can open up again. And also for someone who has lost a spouse, oftentimes from what I've seen in my work and just life experience, that becomes a thing that can link you to the next love. Someone else who has lost someone, maybe in the same way, not in the same way, but you understand what that you understand what that's like. And that changes the caliber of your relationship. The potential partner gets it, and they understand what that's like. And that can become a shared experience, and these are the gifts that the planets can bring us. It takes us off this carousel of just sort of like, I want that love interest. I want that love interest. I want that love interest, and it can actually becomes more about emerging with the entire history of your love and the way that you relate. And it's going to reflect times in which you led by your hopes. And it's going to reflect times in which you're not looking. And it's going to reflect times in which you're ready. You weren't ready before. And it's going to reflect a time when, maybe what you want in a love life is a buddy. It doesn't have to be the bad boy with, the whatever, or the, girl trouble, the troublesome whatever. It doesn't have to be that. It can be someone who's there, and maybe someone who's experienced life as a bad boy, or a, preacher's daughter on the wrong side of the tracks, or, something along those lines. So astrology is as much about our histories as it is our futures. And this is something that's always present in a chart.
That was beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about the technique that you developed. I know there's 4 main points that you look at when you're wanting to quickly see a compatibility between 2 charts. Can you just go through the 4 points sort of at a high level? I know you go into much more detail in the mastery class, but just lay them out a little bit so people would have a starting point if they want to start working with it.
The plus side to reading for a lot of events and galas and things like that is that you read very quickly, and you learn very fast, But one of the things that really kept coming back to me was this idea that of being born in the same season. Okay. An easy way to think of it would be like the spring signs are Aries, Taurus, Gemini. The summer signs are Cancer, Leo, Virgo. The autumn signs are Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and the winter signs are Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And so there's a temperament and there's a timing. There's a way of looking at the world, and there's a way of approaching and living life that the seasonal dispositions, when you group the signs like that, all get. They totally understand. So what I would often see would be like, the spring signs had a natural affinity with one another, or the winter signs had a natural affinity with one another. I would call it being born in your season. So I would see a lot of relationships show up with people born under the same sign. That's when I began to really question the partner sign being the opposite sign. I would see a lot of times people born under the same sign. Okay. Or it would maybe even be the sign before or the sign after. Now, this is not exclusive to romance. You're going to see it with loved ones. You're going to see it with friends. You're going to see it with the people that you work with, that there's this kind of like same time of year, and my feeling, my interpretation, okay, I don't know anything. I just interpret. My interpretation or what struck me was like, this is the time of year when the sun is coming back into its own sign again. And so we're feeling naturally like revived and refreshed. You're like, this is my time of year, And so you're kind of naturally share that with the people who are also experiencing that. So if the sun's coming back to you in your time of year, and the people in your life are also experiencing that, that's, imagine a beach party. Let's go to the beach and soak up the rays. Okay, that's that. And what I would see with the opposite signs is that the sun was farthest away from them. So they felt the most weak or faded or not seen. And so so where the sun is shining on one area, it's like, oh, I'm feeling great. I'm like, I'm in season. The other one was like, I'm not in season. I'm like a small little tomato or a shriveled banana or something like that, So that was the first thing. I would always look for same sign or sign before, sign after. I've since kind of like opened it up to seasonal, a type of thing. Because you see like a lot of Aries and Geminis together and all those sorts of things. The other thing that I would see show up a lot would be sun moon conjunctions, which is a classic technique. That was always taught to me as a marriage combination, and I've used it, and it works wonders. And my interpretation of that was that it talked about emotional comfort, that at the end of the day, who can you take off your makeup and your clothes with and just hang out and be? That's a sun moon conjunction. Okay. It's someone that you can just be comfortable with. Maybe you're hanging out together. Maybe you're going to the latest restaurants together, or maybe you're, going out and seeing friends and things, or maybe you're both on social media, but there's a comfort zone that we get with a sun moon conjunction. The other thing that I saw would be sharing the same ruling planet. I work with ruling planets different than other astrologers do. Sometimes a ruling planet can be described as the ruler of the ascendant or the final dispositor. I've read one in which it was like the phase of the moon before birth or something. Anyway, to me, it's really simple. The ruling planet is the planet that rules your sun sign. So if you're Capricorn, your ruling planet is Saturn. If you're Leo, your ruling planet is the only planet that's not a planet. It's a star. It's the sun, and some people may have two ruling planets. I like to work with the traditional and the modern in that capacity. So Pisces is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. So the ruling planet to me is your patron saint, your life coach, your corporate sponsor, and your den mother all wrapped up into one. And so it's the planet to me, it's the one that's most important after sun, moon, and ascendant is the ruling planet. And so where Saturn, for instance, might be like the buzzkill or the spoiler for people, they're like, oh, Saturn, buzzkill, spoiler, For a Capricorn and Aquarius, Saturn's your ruling planet. So that's the planet that's watching out for you. That's the planet that's looking out for you. And so Saturn actually is good for people born under Capricorn and Aquarius, where it may not be experienced as good if it's not your ruling planet. So your ruling planet is there advocating for you. So let's say you're born under Capricorn and you're going out with an Aquarius. You both share the rulership of Saturn, okay? Or let's say you're a Gemini and you're going out with someone who's a Virgo. You both share the rulership of Mercury. And then you start getting combinations that, you're kind of like, what's up with that? Like, for instance, why is a Taurus going out with a Libra? Well, you share the same ruling planet, Venus, or why is an Aries going out with a Scorpio? There's your Mars. So that's something that I've seen show up a lot. And then the final piece to the puzzle, if I haven't, made the fog over eyes, for everything, but if your ruling planet is connecting to somebody else's sun, let's say I'm a Scorpio and my Mars is in Gemini. What am I doing going out with the Gemini? Well, it's your ruling planet. Your ruling planet Mars is in Gemini. So all of a sudden, Geminis are on. Geminis are on the menu. They're on the specials. So, so that I've seen that create, kind of like these really unlikely combinations. But because the ruling planet has gone and planted its flag in a sign which wouldn't necessarily be seen as sympathetic, it actually creates a very powerful understanding and point of connection between the two people. These are things I look for. These are techniques. These are not hard, fast rules, and this is not a scorecard. If you're like, none of those things apply, and I've been married to this person for 43 years, there may be other things like trines and sextiles or whatever, but try explaining that to Patty Stenger when you've got like 5 minutes to put together a list.
Yes. Oh, I have the fourth one with my ex-husband. So when I was listening to the class again, I was like, oh, but it didn't last. But the truth is it did last. So my Saturn's in Leo and he's a Leo and I'm a Capricorn. The marriage didn't last, but we're still like best friends. We co-parent together. Like we get along really, really well, even though we're not married anymore. So I went, oh, well, that's true. Yeah.
But also, if you listen to your description that you shared with us, right?
Yes.
What were you looking for in your first marriage?
Oh, the father, the good father, and definitely longevity.
Yeah, Leo is the zodiac sign of the good father. You were looking for a father and you married Leo, which is the zodiac sign of the good father. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Because you just illustrated how we are speaking our charts. That's incredible.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's yeah.
Okay,
That's
well,
how it works.
we have a beautiful love bundle, a special on Christopher's relationship classes that he's taught with us here at Astrology Hub. And so if you're listening to this episode on or before June 18th, you can get 33% off of our love bundle, which includes Step Away from the Seventh House and Love Among the Elements. So you'll go into more detail on these 4 points that Christopher uses. Also, 3 of the most common myths or things that he sees in terms of how people think about relationships that he hasn't seen proven out in the charts. And then he'll also teach you, if not the 7th house, first of all, why not the 7th house? And then if not the 7th house, what do we use? Then going deeper into the elements. What does it mean when different elements go together? How does the chemistry work between the different elements? So these 2 are both on sale together for 33% off. If you're listening to this after June 18th, we still wanted to give you a very special opportunity to partake in these classes. So you can actually get 20% off. The code is LOVE20. Christopher is also our Inner Circle astrologer right now. So our Inner Circle members have gotten the most masterful 3.5-hour mastery class on quincunxes and yods and how those work in the chart. But he also went through every single type of yod and what that means. I mean, it's literally masterful. So thank you for that, Christopher. It was beautiful. And our Inner Circle members are raving about it already. So thank you for that.
I'm glad. That makes me happy.
Yes. Okay. And for all of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said in the beginning, you are what makes it possible for us to continue to create and produce and feature these astrologers. We get to do what we love. Hopefully you love it too. And we just want you to know how grateful we are for you. Christopher, is there anything you want to say kind of in summary? We covered a lot of different ground here with relationships, but anything you want to say and leave our audience with?
Relationships are beautiful, improvisational, unexpected, yet very recognizable and familiar things, and I use those words that sort of really don't get along deliberately because that's what's so beautiful about them, and I think that if we can be open to how the charts link and constellate and connect to one another without judgment. I'd love to add without expectation, but we're human beings and that's not going to happen. But the thing is, if we can hopefully do it without judgment and a lot of humor and a sense of wonder and being open, you will be delighted by what shows up in your life. And that's where the planets can really guide you, not to the right relationship, but to relating in a beautiful, human, profound, and lovely way.
Thank you, Christopher. Just another, it's always so amazing to be in the presence of someone with so much experience and skill and study and eloquence and humor and wit. So thank you very much for being here with us today. Thank you for being a continual presence on this platform, both for our Astrology Hub podcast listeners, but then also for our Inner Circle members with your premium podcast content. So amazing.
I love it.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community. And thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. Happy exploring. And we will see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.